You're listening to Squatch Talks Podcast. Real stories and real encounters told by real researchers. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Squatch Talks Podcast. I'm Eric Spinner.
I'm Nathan Moyer.
And I'm Brian Spinner.
And tonight, we're just going to talk about a few things that we find interesting. Not even sure what's going to come out of our mouths tonight, to be honest. But hey, hopefully you enjoyed the last couple. And this is going to get more organic as it goes along. We're still testing out equipment and gear and just figuring out this whole thing. We're real researchers, okay, telling real stories and encounters. But this is all new to us, being here in front of the microphone and actually recording this stuff to share with you. So, the Northwestern Pennsylvania expedition that I did in 2008, because last week I ended up telling the, incident with the creature coming up on my tent at 10:05 in the morning. So I figured, you know what, let me circle back a little bit and just talk about that expedition, because it was my first one with the BFRO, and I was a newbie. That's what we call attendees who have never been on their expedition before. You're newbies, okay? And I got out there a day early, and I got to my destination, which was a KOA campground, which was set up as an initial base camp. And that evening, I was at the office getting all checked in, and I wound up purchasing this shirt at the office, the Jacobs creature, right? That Rick and Tom Jacobs got trail camera footage of. What a controversy that was on the blue board, let me tell you. But as I'm in the office, a guy walks in, and you could tell he was a little bit disheveled from the trail. And it turns out to be Todd Prescott from Ontario. He had actually been down an extra night and had camped out solo at a lake nearby. So he already had some excitement. So he and I decided to, set up tents near one another and became fast friends. I was really thrilled to have somebody with as much experience and knowledge in the field as him to kind of guide me through this process. So, right off the bat, the organizer, Paul Matea, did a great job with having, some demonstrations, equipment demos, track casting demos, all that sort of thing throughout the expedition, which, I learned from experience, and I try to take what I learn on these things and incorporate it into the expeditions that we now provide. So anyway, the first day we were there, we decided, since there was nothing set, it was, a day early, we broke off into a few different groups and just drove down to some of these forestry roads nearby. And we're hoping to maintain radio contact, which didn't actually happen, but Todd and I wound up going to this spot, which was real close to where the Jacobs photos were taken. And, we set up a trail camera, and he had some pheromone chips that he hung out in a tree nearby. We tried, radioing some of the other teams that were out there with no luck. So basically we were on our own. And that night, there really wasn't too much activity aside from we kept hearing this strange vibration. It was really odd. I mean, literally you could feel it as well as hear it. And I don't know where it was coming from. But again, we were very close to where these trail camera, photos were taken. So by the second day, we had a third party join us, Tom from Ohio. He had shown up, and on the radio, you know how you're supposed to radio in when you're coming into base camp. I picked up his transmission and radioed back. So he came over to where Todd and I were set up, and he kind of became the third wheel in our group, and the three of us then wound up hanging together for the rest of the expedition. And we had a few fun, exciting moments, I will say. The first night was Thursday night officially that we were out. And the funny thing is, we had chosen a campsite, okay, which actually was the one that I mentioned in the end of the episode last week, where the creature came up to my tent. But Chip and his group from New York said at the group meeting that afternoon that they had eyed it out. So Todd, being the gracious man that he is, told Chip and his crew that we would, pull up our stakes and find some other digs, which we did. And unfortunately, by having to do that, we wound up not really choosing a great campsite for the evening. And I hung up trail cameras. We had bait. We tried some provocations. Um, didn't really, have any kind of excitement that I felt was substantial, shall we say. But camaraderie, told some stories and whatever. We took some hikes. Friday, we wound up switching to a different campsite near a lake up on a hillside, and it was more remote also. And that night, we made a fire and we were cooking our dinner. Todd had a thermal imager set up on my truck, actually on the hood of my truck, and we had some night vision set up as well. And the funny thing is, just before we're about to eat, we see a hit on the thermal imager. So, Todd's like, "Hey, let me go out and check it out." So he starts walking out, and he gets about 50 yards out and it disappears. So we didn't know what happened to it. He comes back in, we start making, the rest of our meal. And it shows back up again, okay, on the camera. So this time Tom goes out to investigate. And I'm on the night vision. Todd's got the thermal. And so Todd, is like observing this heat signature through the thermal, and I'm watching Tom through the night vision. Anyway, he gets out about 100 yards out, and Todd radios him because my radio was on the wrong channel. Okay. Beginner's mistake, of course. Todd notices that the individual stood up. And so he radios Tom, "It's on your right." And it just stood up. Tom goes into a crouched position. He's spinning around because he's got night vision goggles on. So he's looking just through night vision goggles, not thermal. And he's spinning around, and I'm seeing this, and Todd's seeing it through the therm. And I'm trying to radio him saying, "It's on your right. It's on your right." But he couldn't hear me, of course, because I was on the wrong channel. So anyway, very soon we realized that it's just a deer. And so Todd radios him and says, "Oh, it's a deer. Don't worry," And so Tom comes walking back towards us. And you know how they have that, you get that nervous laughter kind of thing when you have like a bit of relief over something that's, got you a little angst up. So
Yeah.
Todd and I are like kind of giggling and cracking up as Tom comes walking back into camp, and he goes, "I don't think it's very funny. I don't think it's funny at all. I might think it's funny tomorrow, but right now I don't think it's very funny." And so, of course, hearing him say that made me crack up even more, and I was being like a total jerk. But I was relieved that he was safe, but it was funny. You had to be there, okay? So we finish our meal, right? And I'm feeling guilty about laughing and carrying on. So I say, "You know what? I'm gonna go use the facilities," and I grab a roll of toilet paper and I start walking out into the forest. And I go about 200 yards out, and I urinate on a big tree. And I had a feeling they were going to mess with me, right? Just because I deserved it. So I urinate on the tree, and then I move to my right, and then they start yelling, "There's something on your right. There's something on your right." And I'm like, yeah, they're messing with me, right? So I said, "What?" And I pick up a big branch that I see on the ground. All I have is my red LED headlamp on. I pick up this branch, and there's a stump in front of me, and I beat the heck out of this stump with this branch. And I get done, and from up in the hillside in front of me, I hear this single knock, like, and I went, "Wait, that's a knock." That's a single knock. That means don't come any closer, is what I thought, right? That was the message I got. And so I turn around and I go, "Hey, I got a knock." Huh? "I got a knock." So at this point, I'm like, well, let me go the hell back to base camp. I'm walking back the other way because it was a distance, Anyhow, I get back into camp, and they didn't believe me at first, but I had a digital recorder stuck in my pocket. And so when I got back, I was able to play them the recording. And sure enough, I recorded that knock. that was my first knock I got on an expedition. Okay.
That's
Um,
awesome. So Eric, what if I can just interrupt for a
sure.
second? Um, you when they were yelling to you, there's something on your right. Were they playing around with you?
No, what happened was because I urinated on the tree,
Mhm.
it made it look like there was now two thermal images because I moved to my right.
Ah,
Okay.
gotcha, gotcha.
So maybe a little bit of them messing with me, messing with Sasquatch. I don't know.
Hmm.
But that's how I took it. So I said, "Oh, okay," and I played along. But so that's how the second and so I don't want to end there. Todd is like I said, very scientific about how he goes about doing his research. And so we had to eliminate the possibility that there was any other campers nearby that potentially did that knock. Okay. Which meant hiking up the forest road for like a mile just to make sure that there was nobody else camped out. And there wasn't. On the way back, he and I did a couple of back and forth provocations, with the blast block that I use now, and he also uses a blast block. So we did some back and forth knocks, and we got another response. So he was pretty confident at that point that we weren't dealing with humans, but rather, Bigfoot. So that was exciting for us. I mean, hey, getting knocks on any expedition is great, or howls or
Yeah,
whatever. But
it
so
is.
that was the first official night, right? So we're like Friday. Oh no, excuse me, that was Friday. Sorry. So the next we're like, well, let's not tell anybody. We don't want everybody coming over here to this side of the pond, you know what I mean, and disrupting our research. So we'll keep it to ourselves. So Saturday morning at the group meeting, we were like thinking we were going to just not say anything, right, and keep it to ourselves. But then Chip and his crew had the thermal, Sasquatch sighting on their equipment at the campsite, which we originally had chosen. Okay. Um, so that was kind of a bummer for us, but at the same time, it was like, so hey, much more interesting than a couple of knocks. So hey, yeah, we got a couple of knocks. It wasn't a bad night.
Well, I mean, it actually verifies if they have a, it coincides, the thermal sighting and then the knocks are two things that you can associate with Sasquatch. So,
Sure.
eh,
Except that we were quite a distance from one another. You know what I mean? Where we had set up on Friday night was way down this road in a different section of the Allegheny Forest.
oh,
So,
right.
but like I said, in this other spot where they were, that was what we dubbed it Camp Chip at that point. Okay. Saturday, Paul took us all on a hike down to the location where the Jacobs photos were taken. And I did a little reenactment with another one of the attendees. And Saturday night, what happened Saturday night? Oh gosh, I can't even remember. See that? I didn't take my Prevagen today, but hey, Saturday night we wound up connecting with Mike Aragona, and he also came over to that section where we were, but he was on the lower side of this hillside, okay, closer to the lake, and we were up higher, and we did some back and forth provocations, and Mike and his team down below were having some fun, and the audio from that is just phenomenal, and he was getting some response growls and huffs.
So wasn't this in the area where he had the guardrail and the or the metal gate, whatever it
Yeah,
was?
I'm pretty sure that's what the one that you're thinking of. And yeah, it was it was very entertaining listening to his audio after he got back and edited it. Um, but yeah, that one definitely needed to be edited for mature audiences because he was really psyched from the provocations and the responses. They were having fun,
Yeah,
and
definitely.
we could communicate with them via radio. And I remember at that time the BFRO was giving like recording digital recorders and a couple of pieces of equipment to the groups to use during their expedition. So I think we did manage to record some knocks that evening. I know I had my own digital recorder that I got, the one from the night before, which was great. So yeah, that was pretty fun. And as I mentioned, on Sunday we had the wrap up meeting in the morning and took some pictures, group shots. Everybody took off except for Todd Prescott and we decided to go back to Camp Chip and spend another night. And knowing that there was a Sasquatch sighted there a couple of nights early really made it more enticing. And that's when I
Oh my
had my
God. Yeah,
experience.
it'd be so psyched to be in an area, you know,
That
when there's
fresh,
such a, yes, exactly.
you know?
Yeah.
And so it's funny because that night, as I mentioned, I talked about the details from the end of that night and how we hiked around I said for a couple, we actually hiked through the forest for, I mean, hours. And like I said, it was dark forest that really, I mean, thick, you know what I mean? And it was spooky too. And he just told me story after story from some of the expeditions he'd been on, you know, in the past. And so it just gave me such great, you know, thrills to hear some of these encounters and some of these other stories from other researchers. So I can remember how I felt listening to him tell these tales. I'm hoping that's what our listeners are going to feel when they hear us telling some of our experiences, you know. But yeah, we got back, like I said, around 4:30 in the morning, and then at 10:05 in the morning is when the individual paid me a visit at my tent. And you know, it's kind of funny that 10:05 time period. I think that must mean something for me. I don't know, again, if it's some kind of connection to whatever, but because it was 10:05 at your expedition, Brian, in New York when it came up. So
Yeah.
interesting correlation.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, it was really just great, you know, spending that time on my first expedition with Todd and the other BFRO members who were really knowledgeable and had a lot of experience, and getting to meet Mike Aragona, Big Mike. And I'll tell you
Right.
again, as I said before, he's got a great set of lungs. And I left there feeling really good, really charged up, and I took what I learned home with me, and I proceeded to, you know, incorporate what I learned in the Pine Barrens nearby. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I'm going to throw it over to Nathan Moyer from Pennsylvania.
Well, thank you very much. You hear about all these different stories people tell you when they're on their expeditions, like what you just said. Then you go home and you're going camping with your kids, right? And so I got Tira, she's 15 years old at the time, listening to what everybody tells me when we're on these expeditions. So we're camping, one of my favorite places to go. And we go out by ourselves, all just the two of us. Where do we go? Where everybody told us to go. Go sit by the dumpsters at the end of the campground and see what happens. So we go down there. I don't know if we were even, it was probably the first time we went camping after our expedition. We were still that green, you know. We just decided to tromp down there. We're sitting there next to the dumpsters in the dark, sitting on our little camp chairs, waiting. And people come walking down, throw stuff in the dumpster, and I'm thinking, we're going to scare the crap out of these poor people. That's the kind of dumb shit you do, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Anything you can do to try to entice any kind of
Response.
response. That's it. Or any kind of activity, whatever you got to do. After we had that tree pushed down at Ricketts Glen, we went back we kept going up there until everything dried up. We were up there probably a month later, me and another guy out at night. We were hunkered down where the tree was pushed over, and we're looking up over the top of the hill, and it was backlit from the moon. And there between two trees, we saw this thing going like this.
Swaying.
Back and forth, swaying. It just real slow. And I'm looking at it. I didn't say anything to the guy that was with me. And I thought, I'm going to see if he sees it, because I wasn't sure I was seeing what I was seeing. And he says, do you see that up the hill there? And I said, that thing swaying between the two trees? He said, yeah. Do you see that? I said, that was one of the biggest things I ever saw in my life. I can't believe we put another guy up there in his place the next morning, in the place where we saw this thing. And he's 6 foot tall. And all we could see was from his chest, like just below his shoulders, to his head. And we saw this thing from like belly button up. It was huge.
Wow.
he spread his arms apart because it was peeking from one tree to the other. And it was almost as far as he could spread his arms. That's how far apart these trees were. So this thing had to be 4 foot wide. It was incredible.
Damn.
Sounds massive. Wow.
And that's Pennsylvania. That's not even Kentucky.
Right.
Yeah.
It was massive. But it just goes to show you too, that's probably the same thing that was pushing the tree over. Because if it was that big, it would have no problem snapping that tree at 8 foot high. It was just gigantic.
Wow.
That's incredible.
So, did you guys investigate afterwards, the next day? Look for, did you have any findings?
We went up there when we saw it, because as we were looking at it and trying to see what we were seeing, we heard a car coming down the access road, and it was probably a park ranger driving down the access road. So we turned and looked at that, and when we turned back up to look up the hill, it was gone. There was nothing. Didn't hear anything, nothing. So I made a big mark on the ground, big X mark. So I knew exactly where I was standing the next morning. Because we saw that, we barely even slept that night. We were back at first light trying to look for prints, anything. We didn't want to go up there with flashlights because I didn't want to walk over something that you couldn't see with your red lamp. I mean, we went up there, but we went around the back. We didn't want to, because we knew it was there. We didn't want to put any more footprints up there until we could go back in the daylight and see what we could see. So we went around to the side and came up from I guess that would be the west side of it coming in.
Mm-hmm.
We couldn't find anything though. It was too much leaf litter. And
what you just described is what I've been hoping for this entire time that I've been doing this kind of research. And it all stems from this movie poster, again, with the silhouette of the Sasquatch standing there in between the tall trees.
Yep.
That's what I've been trying to hope for to have happen to me all this time, and you just described exactly what I envisioned that to be.
Yeah,
Am I close?
It was absolutely unbelievable.
Oh my God. That's exactly what I'm hoping to have happen.
That's what I witnessed, the sway that you mentioned, the sway like that. Exactly what I saw in, Lake George on my first expedition, on Therm. Yeah. Didn't see it with my own eyes.
And that's cool.
But
the silhouette that he just talked about, that's the thing that really I've been waiting to have happen, aside from in my face, one standing there going, "Hurry."
You could see the bump. You could see the bump that would be the head with no neck.
Mm-hmm.
It lost the, if you go by the picture behind you, it was from the elbows up. You didn't see shoulders. You didn't see between the arms and the body.
Right.
It was a bump on a black nothingness.
Similar to what I was describing as the silhouette that I saw through my tent fabric, right?
Yeah.
Just the upper torso.
And it just kept going real slow back and forth. You almost couldn't see it swaying. You could just tell that it was moving from one tree to the other. It wasn't a real fast sway. It would go to the one tree and it would stay there for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Then it would go real slow to the other tree and stay there for a second. Then it would sit in the middle a little bit. Then it would go back over, and it kept moving. And like I said, I made a big X on the. I can still take you to that exact same spot. I can take you to there today, because we went back there so many times, and I put people in different positions. Because I said, okay, what if it was a deer up the hill further? Because it was backlit.
Yeah.
If the deer was up further and it was walking between the two trees, it wouldn't know that it's doing it if it had its back turned to me and it was moving. But there is no way, because I've gone back there probably 50 times at that same time of night in the same season and tried to recreate it, and you can't.
And what season was it? I forget.
It was It was cold.
Okay.
It was,
Well, I'll take you up on that offer, but I don't want to do it in the cold. I'd rather it got a little
Yeah.
warmer out. Okay.
Well, I was just wearing a flannel shirt. Everybody else was bundled up, but
Was it spring or fall? Do you remember?
it was fall.
Okay.
It was definitely fall.
Seems to be the best time, you know, in your
Yeah.
area and I
Yeah.
think Brian's area, my area, I think it's the most activity in the fall.
Yeah.
Would you agree, Brian?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree as well. I mean, it makes sense because really that's when the animals are
More
really most active. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. They're getting, you know, they're storing up for the winter,
Mm,
you know? So
wow.
And
yeah.
they have more time too. They have more time. The sun goes down sooner. You know, they have a longer
Right.
time to be awake if they are as nocturnal as we think they are.
How far
Right.
up on the hillside was it from you, Nathan?
This thing was probably only 60 yards away from us.
That's close.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's closer than the one I saw in British Columbia up on
Yeah.
the hillside.
It was close enough that once we both realized what we were seeing, we couldn't talk anymore.
Really?
You know, it was one of those things. He asked me, he said, "Did you see that?" And I said, "Yeah, that thing's swaying between the trees." He said, "Yeah, is that what I think it is?" And we both just stopped. We just couldn't talk anymore. And then the truck came down, and it seemed like an eternity. But when you listen to it on the recorder, it's almost instantaneous. But it felt like between the time we realized what it was and the time the truck came, it felt like it was 20 minutes. But really, it was there immediately, and scared it off. But yeah, it just seemed like we were staring at that thing forever, and it was bonkers.
Crazy.
Wow.
We went back, and I told you we go to that spot a lot. Every time we're up there, we go to that spot. Every time we go there, we take pictures of different stuff, take pictures of the tree that it pulled down. Every time there's different crap floating in the picture and things that, you know, different orbs and whatnot. So there's something going on with that spot. But
Wow.
it's also a place where water runs too. So I don't know what that has to do with it, but it could be something.
Natural resource for everything.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Hey, was there any other details, Nate, that you can think of along with what happened, the smell or anything like that? Did you hear any movement?
Nope. Never heard anything. Never heard it making noise. Yeah. No, it was just there and gone.
Were you guys still, like, were you guys in place where in your location when you noticed this thing?
Now, when we were sitting in a group of 4, and we actually, 2 of us broke away and walked up the hill, back away from the group quite a bit. We walked across a little stream thing and went up maybe 15 feet up onto the hill, and we stopped and I knelt down onto one knee because again my back hurts all the time, and there it was. We walked up on it, so it was probably watching us sit in the group and wanted to know what we were doing when we split apart from the group.
So you never felt threatened by it or any kind of, you know, fear? No. Okay.
No, it was just pure adrenaline. That one, that was incredible. Again, you know, no real features other than, you know, it was just a lump of a head on a gigantic torso.
Was there a moon out that night? Is that how you were able to see it?
Behind it, it was the hill was backlit with the moon.
Oh wow!
It was perfect. Like
it was perfect.
Exactly. Yeah, it was. It was just like that.
Unbelievable. Damn. Well, you got to take me up there for sure.
Oh yeah,
I'm down.
It's a great place. It really is.
I want to go.
Everybody. All right, I had my turn now, Brian. How about you tell us a story?
So I'm going to tell you guys a story about what happened at my parents' house. This was probably back in, God, I want to say 2013. Okay. My dad has a 22 rifle, and he saw a deer on the back of his property. He took his rifle and he shot this deer, and you know, basically he was going to get some meat out of it. Okay, that was his intentions. So I had come up to the house on that day, and I had witnessed this dead deer that he had shot. It was littered in ticks, and he wanted me to come up there, and help him kind of get some meat off of it. But when he noticed all the ticks and everything, he was like, I don't want this deer anymore. So I saw the deer littered in ticks, and we just kind of left it there. The next day I called him up. I was like, Dad, we better drag that deer back into the woods a bit. You don't want it to smell up the property. So he said, yeah. He's like, sure. So at the time, my mom was running a daycare, and she had gone out in the back to where this deer was, just to kind of check it out and make sure there was nothing else going back there, because she had the kids over by the house, and she came across this horrible smell, and she noticed that the deer wasn't there anymore, and she told my dad, who then also came out and witnessed this horrible smell. If I could describe this smell, it would be like wet dog and garbage, really foul smelling. Okay.
Feces.
Yeah. Feces. They both witnessed the smell and also saw that the deer was gone. All right. And they called me up and they said something had taken this deer away. Okay. The deer is gone. You don't need to come up here. And I said, hold on a second. I started asking them questions. Was there drag marks? Anything like that? And I said, I'm going to come up there. I'm going to come up and investigate. What happened. So I get up there and I notice there's no deer, and there was no drag marks for this. I mean, this deer probably had to weigh at least 150 to 175 pounds. It was a good sized deer. So I didn't notice the smell when I had gotten there. And, it was something that I thought, was very squatchy. It was definitely very squatchy. My cousin, when he was probably 8 years old, so this is probably going back, I don't know, 2010. My cousin was at my parents' house, same location, and my mom had built a fire on the back of the property, not too far from where my dad had shot this deer. They had a little fire pit going. So, he went out to check the fire, and as he approached the area, he saw something crouched on this little knoll on the back of the property. And when I say crouched, picture maybe a man kind of getting down and in a crouched position and just kind of standing there. But he said it was dark, it was hairy, and he could have mistook it for a bear, but he said it didn't look like a bear. And he went hauling ass right back up into the house, and he told my mom about it. And she was just like, it was probably a bear. So this location also has yielded garbage being taken from a garbage can, and then with a lid. The garbage can had a lid. The garbage was removed, and the lid was replaced, and it was taken up on the hillside next to the house. So basically, yeah, this location is near a research area. It's near an area where there's been multiple road cross sightings. It's near an area where I've had rocks thrown at me. So there's a lot of things that add up, and like I said, seem pretty squatchy to me. Nobody's actually seen anything. We did think that we found that skull to that deer on the property, probably about 75 yards back in a certain area. So, who knows, but definitely an interesting story. Definitely some strange happenings, and definitely in an area which makes me believe
Could be
Uh,
Squatch.
It could be a Squatch.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I bet your parents were pretty surprised when you said that to them afterwards, because you probably mentioned,
Well,
"Hey, Dad, this might be a Bigfoot," you know?
yeah. Yeah, well, they were both, kind of questioning things a lot. They've seen bears there,
Mhm.
right next to the house. So, there's a lot of things that they were kind of like, they had to draw a line between, is it bear? Is this something a bear could do? Is this something that, could a bear pick up a 175-pound deer in its mouth and carry it away,
Sure.
without leaving marks?
No.
That was something I questioned. I'm not a hunter, and I don't know, what a bear can do, but I don't believe that that would be,
That's
not
good.
without leaving some sort of trace or drag marks.
And Nathan, would you agree? I mean, a cougar, right? Even though they claim there's no mountain lions in PA or New
Oh,
York,
there's
right?
plenty of mountain lions in Pennsylvania.
Well, I mean, I'm sure, I'm sure they say there isn't though, right? And
Right.
so, I mean, you'd have
And
to
there's
have some kind of drag marks, right, with a cougar.
Yeah, they're not. They can't pick them up either.
Right.
I mean, they drag them away and climb up a tree with them, but they
Yeah.
can't pick them up that they're not dragging on the ground.
And
Impossible.
the area that was under the deer and the surrounding it was covered in leaf litter,
Right.
so it would have seen some kind of drag marks. I mean, there was, if I remember correctly, there was almost like some scuff marks, but not like anything that you would have seen for the size of a deer.
Right.
It was definitely seemed like it was carried.
And it's a big animal. So, I mean, obviously, what else could do that, right?
Right.
Pick it up and under its arm and walk off with it, probably, like no
Yeah,
problem at all.
I was during an expedition. I had a report come in where the lady said that the black bear went into her fenced-in yard in the back, picked up her goat, put it under its arm, and stepped over the 4-foot tall fence and walked away. I've never seen a black bear put a goat under its arm and walk away.
I've seen one at the circus do that, but
Yeah, well, maybe the circus.
Now, what do you think that bear was going to do with that goat, though? I mean,
He needed a new pet, I believe.
you think a pet?
Lamb chops.
That's the part I'm curious about,
Yeah.
Like, what
Yeah.
happens to that poor goat or
Yeah.
lamb?
I mean, a story from the area, and from my research area, that's relatable to that would be that I saw on Facebook that one of my Facebook friends and somebody that was older than me growing up was missing a baby calf, or maybe it was a baby horse, and I immediately put 2 and 2 together. Like, nobody's gonna steal this baby horse. It was kind of tucked away in a pen, and all I saw on the post was, this horse is missing. It was stolen, or whatever, But not far from there was several occurrences that were extremely squatchy, that we will get into further down the line. So
That'll be fodder for next week's exciting episode. Those were some really great stories, and I think that'll keep them glued to want to hear more of that next week, Brian, and hopefully that'll entice them to tune in to next week's episode of Squatch Talks podcast. So let's wrap it up there for tonight. Thanks for listening.
I appreciate everybody listening. Thanks.
until next time, thank you.
Thanks for checking out this episode of Squatch Talks podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, follow, and give us a like, and stay tuned for more exciting stories on Squatch Talks.